Hey Terranova, man, I hope you've been enjoying this series that we're doing on Daniel as much as I have. There are so many themes, there's so many places that we can be going in this series that we have to kind of move past quickly because the content is so much and so good. But one of the themes that has stood out to me through this series is something we don't talk a lot about, and that is evangelism. That Daniel has decided that he wants his life to point people to God. He makes that decision as a young man, as a teenager, and for the rest of his life, he wants to make sure that his life honors God and as his life points other people to God. And he does that in such a culturally sensitive way that it just blows my mind. Daniel lived in a very pluralistic society, as we do as well. He lived in a world where there was plenty of room for lots of gods and lots of ways to God. We see this last weekend in the story we talked about, or Scott talked about last weekend. Nebuchadnezzar sets up this statue, this idol in the middle of the desert. Everybody says, hey, bow down to it. Everybody has plenty of room for that. They're like, sure, yeah, we've one more God. That is not a problem for us. But it was for Daniel and his friends, or particularly his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, aka Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it's hard for us to imagine, but their faith was considered very unreasonable. All of these stories that we've been looking at, it is unreasonable for them to draw the lines that they're drawing and take the stands that they're standing. Nobody else is taking those stands. Nobody's really respecting them for it either. It's like, what are you guys doing? Why do you hold that kind of a line? It makes no sense to us. There's all kinds of gods. Just bow down. And in many ways, there's a lot of similarities to our culture and to living in a pluralistic society where having this sense that no, there is a personal God who wants to know you and have a relationship with you, and it's not 1,000 ways to him. He's making the way to you himself. That can come off pretty unreasonable in our world. But what the way they do it is so culturally sensitive. It's see throughout the stories. And by the way, don't miss this weekend. Even if you have to catch it online or catch it after the fact, make sure you catch this weekend. The story develops a little further. And what we see Daniel doing is talking to the most powerful man in the world, a guy who could kill him just like that. Talking about God. And Daniel doesn't get up in his face, doesn't really get up in anybody's face saying, you and your false gods, and you're going to hell, and you're wrong, and there are no gods but God, and Marduk is just a fake. He doesn't do that. He simply, rather than discounting all of the other spiritual practices and the sorcery and the witchcraft, the many gods, he doesn't argue against any of them. He simply points to God. In fact, the way he even refers to God is so culturally sensitive, calls him the God of heaven often, or sometimes the great God. And he uses language that they have room for. And he's slowly moving Nebuchadnezzar. He's kind of creating these categories and moving Nebuchadnezzar in a very attractive way to draw closer to the God that, in Daniel's point of view, is very much for Nebuchadnezzar. It's like, this God is on your side. He is for you. He is doing things for you and wants to have this relationship where your life honors him as well. By the way, again, don't miss this weekend. And a story that, it's a crazy story. It's probably a story you've never actually heard before. And so it'll be something just new and fresh, and a really, really big, culturally current, important principle that we draw from this story from Daniel chapter 4. But I just want to leave you with a couple of questions, leave all of us with a couple of questions for this week. And that is, first of all, is your life pointing people to God? Are you living a life that honors God and actually points people to God in some kind of way? Is that what your life is about these days? Is it spiritually potent? Is it authentic? Is it real? Is it attractive? Is your life pointing people to God? And then the second question picks up on that, and that's like, how can you, in a culturally sensitive way, how can you, in a culturally appropriate way, actually point people to the God who is for them this week? To just drop him into things in an attractive way that just reminds people there is a God who is for you, who knows you, who is in control, and wants to have a relationship with you. How is your life honoring God and pointing people to God? And how will you do that this week? And I hope, again, that we see you this weekend for part 4 of our series on Daniel. God bless you this week.